You work with a person and you identify what they need and you give them exactly what they need. And that's not just relevant to performance, right? That's relevant to health and wellness and the whole nine, right? It's like, do some people see success in doing like templates and group and all of that? Absolutely. Is it the majority? Absolutely not.
Hey, it's Ben Wise, and this is The Fitness Movement. The Fitness Movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. Zor Fitness is my company and my platform to deliver training-related content to people just like you. The site features in-depth articles, movement breakdowns, and our online training program, The Protocol. And I offer one-on-one remote coaching for fitness athletes. So I hope you check it out. Head over to zorfitness.com. That's ZOAR fitness.com. See you there. Today we got Carl Hardwick on the show. He is the CEO of OPEX Fitness. So Carl played collegiate football at St. Mary's University. And after school, he spent some time in military service, and he actually got placed in charge of his battalion's fitness program, which is rather fitting. Since his time in the service, Carl actually opened multiple OPEX gyms. And as I mentioned, he's now the CEO of OPEX Fitness. On socials, Facebook, Carl Hardwick, Instagram at Hardwick Carl, Twitter at Hardwick_Carl. And then obviously you can follow OPEX Fitness on their social platforms, Instagram and Facebook at OPEX Fitness, and on the web at opexfit.com. Two additional notes from the show that will be helpful as you're listening. First of all, we talk about CCP. This is OPEX certification for coaches. So it is their coaching certification program, CCP. And then I also mentioned their BMW assessment, which again, I don't actually explain what that is, but it is body, move, and then work. So that's part of OPEX's assessment process. Today, we get into the advantages of individual design and ultimately how to effectively coach competitive and recreational athletes. And then we also talk about how to get out of the way as a coach to allow your clients to succeed. We talk about reactive periodization based on athlete feedback and the kinds of feedback that's required for you to do that effectively. And then Carl gives some advice for young professionals in the fitness space. So without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Carl Hardwick. Carl, welcome to the show.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, man, I know that we said it prior to you hitting record, but this is our third time trying this, so it's good to finally get on.
Yeah, yep. I said third time's the charm. Finally made it happen. Well, I'm excited for the actual conversation.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too.
So starting off, I got to ask you, I heard this relationship and I want to kind of dig into it a little bit more, but who is Charles Poliquin and how did it come about that you two work together?
Oh, man. Yeah. So Charles was indirectly, I was indirectly associated with Charles to start. So my strength conditioning coach in college was a good friend of Charles's and brought a lot of his ideologies to what we were doing in the weight room up there. And, his name was Dan Laramie, and him and I became really close because that was my route, right? Like that, I thought I was going to, be a Division I strength and conditioning coach, and that's all I wanted to do. So I just wanted to pick his brain. He brought that Poliquin spin on things, which was really interesting and very unlike anything I'd ever seen before being introduced to that. So Dan Laramie introduced me to the ideology, the methodology, whatever you want to call it. And then I was lucky enough to meet Charles in Rhode Island and do about a 40 day mentorship with him at the Poliquin Institute, took PICP, the whole deal. And, him and I didn't have a close relationship at all. I'm sure if, he was still here with us, you'd ask him about me. He'd be like, who the hell is that? So we weren't close by any means. But he had a big impact in my trajectory in this industry.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people who are coming up in the space, whether actually if they've been around a while or not, they still have people that they look up to and respect and wanting to look into their specific methodologies. Yeah, it's cool to hear about other people who are more experienced in the space who they kind of went to for that.
Yeah, the funny thing though, man, is it wasn't the A, B's and C's that intrigued me with Charles. It was his mannerisms, his personality, his the way he attacked things, the way that he and by attacked I mean like when he had a problem, the way that he would try to figure that problem out. He wasn't just mimicking what everyone else was saying in the space. The guy took a lot of chances and didn't apologize for it, and I really respected that.
So one of the things that he's known for is like the strength ratio stuff. I know OPEX, which obviously you are interconnected with, does strength ratio stuff quite a bit in their assessment process. Is that just by circumstance, or is there any other connection there?
No. So you got to remember James Fitzgerald, our founder. Right. He was very close with Charles. So James has a very vast fitness background, as anyone that knows James knows that. Yeah. So him and Charles were good friends. And James learned a lot from him, and he took some things from Charles, and there's some synergies with, the way that we did calipers back in the day to the way that Paul O'Quinn did it in PICP, the structural balance or strength ratio stuff, and how James took that and molded it to, at the time, a more functional fitness environment. So that was definitely influenced by Charles and PICP from James.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't even really know that. I think I might have actually been first exposed more formally to like the strength ratio stuff from OPEX, I think. So it's kind of cool knowing that that's actually where it sort of originated from, was his relationship with James. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a decent amount of literature on it as well. I mean, Mel Siff talked about it a little bit. Paul O'Quinn just took it to the next level. And, when James got his hand on the thought of it and how it relates to, how James connected absolute strength movements and strength speed movements, and he started intertwining gymnastics and noticing, and that's where the term structural balance came from. It was just understanding where an athlete was imbalanced. And, there's some performance stuff that can come from that, some negative performance stuff that can come from being imbalanced, and, right. Some injury prevention stuff as well. So James took it to an even further extent and implementing it in functional fitness. Yeah.
And even like Sam Smith, who I interviewed this season, like he's written for Big Dogs, as you got the shirt on right now. He's written some really good stuff about like for competitive CrossFitters and that side of thing. What should your deadlift to back squat to front squat to clean to snatch, like all those ratios, kind of breaking it out. So yeah, it's gone through a couple iterations already. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So yeah, again, you're the CEO of OPEX. So some of the questions I got for you sort of related to OPEX methodology. I know you're not, you have your own opinions is what I'm trying to say by this. But also you're working there for a reason. And because a lot of it is because your philosophies are aligned. So why does OPEX, and I'm guessing this is also the case for you, but you could correct me if I'm wrong. Why do you love individual design?
It fucking makes sense, right? It's like, it's in the world that I was brought up in. It's weird, man, because, James's path in fitness and my path in fitness, it happened at different times. James is a little bit older than I am, but they were very similar in the way that we were brought up through this thing, right? It was like, at a very young age, it was sports, it was performance, it was trying to be one of the best in the world at something, right? And you get to university, you have like a mentor in university, you start to look at fitness a little bit differently. You start to work with people in a group setting, you work with people one-to-one in personal training and Globo gyms. And James and I were both brought up in that world. And then this functional fitness craze hits, and now fitness was being implemented in a group environment. And it wasn't just for health and wellness, right? It was like group environment to actually make people better. And that just never made sense to me. I'm like, why the hell would I do the same thing this guy over here is doing, right? Like when I competed in this sport, like I never did the same program as someone else. That just never made sense to me. And it was because the way that I was brought up, through university and through experience and working with people, it was just like, yeah, you work with a person and you identify what they need, and you give them exactly what they need. And that's not just relevant to performance, right? That's relevant to health and wellness and the whole nine, right? It's like, we don't want to just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and hope that it sticks. Do some people see success in doing like templates and, group and all of that? Absolutely. Right. Is it the majority? Absolutely not. Right. Because I worked in that world also for quite some time. And I'm not like poo-pooing that model or anything like that, but personalization and everything just makes a lot of sense. And, I've said this a few times, but it's like, imagine you and I walk into a doctor's office, right? And let's say you go first, right? I'm in the waiting room, you go in, you have this issue that I don't have. You come out with this prescription, right? Based on the issue that you have. I go in and that doctor's like, oh, no, it's all good. I just gave Ben his prescription. You take the same thing. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? Like, I have a completely different issue. It's like, why don't we look at fitness that way, right? Like my issues in fitness or my goals and what I'm trying to accomplish and my capabilities are just different than yours. So therefore the prescription should be different. It should be personalized.
Yeah. I always say like any training program that's written for not an individual, so like a demographic, it's really written for like an avatar or like an average, where I always use the description of like you take the bowling ball and you just roll it straight down the lane and hope you hit as many pins as you can. And like inevitably there's going to be like 9 out of 10 people that's just not ideal for. And the one person that it is okay for, typically they're like 5'9", pretty average size. They got average length limbs. Like they move pretty well. They were athletic before. Like it's like just makes sense that person, okay, like you'd be okay with that. But for like everyone else, like it's just so wildly unideal.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't know, man. I think we need to look at every industry or everything through a lens of, is what I'm doing, is what I'm delivering, is what I'm having a conversation about relevant to the person that I'm having the conversation about that thing with, right? And it's like, it can span across anything, right? It's like, I'm here running this company and we have a good number of employees that work for us here. I couldn't imagine treating every employee the same, like having the same conversations with every employee, going through like a quarterly review with like the same questions and answers going through. It's like, we take that shit really far, man, in terms of personalizations and internally. And what we do here at OPEX, it's like every single individual needs to be treated as an individual. And that's a part of, one of our core values, right? It's like, we have to respect and honor the individual. And that's in fitness, that's in relationships, that's in absolutely everything.
Yeah. Respecting the individual goes on so many different levels. I think one of the obvious ones are some of the ones we mentioned already. Like if someone has glaring weaknesses where like they are super powerful, but they can't sustain it all. Like obviously you're going to give them a bunch of easier aerobic protocols, like things like that. And I think most people get that, but so many things, like I think for individual design are like the things that are practical and logistical that just like really make the program actually work. So like, for example, you are someone who works shift hours and you have to figure out how you're going to fit these different sessions into your week. If you're individual design, you can sit down with your coach and talk about, okay, where can we fit these different pockets of time so that we can actually get good quality training in? And it's just like all of those like little intangible things that like actually talking with someone makes such a difference in just like your ability to actually execute a decent program. I mean, do you see like one of the big advantages of individual design is just being logistical in those sorts of ways?
Yeah, I think so, man. But I think we also have to be honest and upfront, right? It's like individual design isn't the end all be all for every person in the world, right? Like I think the avatars that you're talking about now are more the competitive avatars, right? Dude, we've seen a lot of competitors follow something that wasn't built just for them and have success. Yeah. Right. What I look at though, it's like, what's the sustainability of that success? Right. Because, you and I, can sit down and throw this awesome program together right now. Let's say we throw this like 12-month program together that has like all the considerations inside of it. It's like, we really thought about this thing. And then, we have like the male and female prescriptions, the whole nine, and we throw this thing out there. We're like, we just want everyone to do this thing. We're not going to charge anyone any money for it. We're going to see a lot of people have success following that program. Now, let's say that we do that same thing for 5 years. It's like, the people that had success year 1, are they still having success year 5? And the answer is probably not, right? Because that program just does not have the ability to pivot, mold, and meet that individual exactly where they are based on where their circumstances are in that given time. And I think the example that you laid out is a good one, right? It's like, someone has shift work and they have to understand like where to fit their training program in. If you and I put that program out there, that shift worker could probably even have great amounts of success, but they're not going to be able to sustain that success because they're going to burn out eventually, because we didn't have those things in mind, right? It's that survival of the fittest mindset, right? And there's a lot of athletes that have had great amounts of success following stuff like that. So when I look at individual design, I think it's the most sustainable program, the most sustainable fitness program. But that doesn't mean that it's going to give every single person the greatest amount of success in the first 3 to 6 months that they do it, right? And that, dude, like, I've experienced that a lot. Like, I used to coach a lot of people, and I coach people in a group environment. I coach people in individual design. And what I noticed back in like 08, 09 in individual design was the people that I was coaching weren't having that like skyrocket success that the people that were like following this templated, like, and I'm talking like athletes specifically, following this templated, like, hey, we're going to get some work in and we're going to kick your ass every single day. The people that were in individual design, their ascent was like this. If this is on audio, it's like a very small linear progression, right? The people that it was like, hey, ass kicking, let's go. Those people were like that. Then we look at, if I was smart enough to like plot successes on a line, it would have been like, my individual design people, my people that were on this ass kicking program. And then it's like a year later, the individual design people caught up and either maintained or kept getting better. And the ass kicking program people, they left and got a new coach or followed a different program, or, went the individual design route to rehab all the issues that they went through in that ass kicking program. So the reality of it is that, those programs work for an amount of time, and if an athlete's goal is like, hey, this 12 months, I want to be the best that I possibly can, and I'm going to wrap it up in this 12 months. If you and I are coaching that person, we're like, hey, capabilities aren't there. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do a bunch of like muscle up density because you can't actually get your humerus to vertical. And they're like, I don't give a shit. Like, I just want to get really good. I want to start to obtain some really good capacity and gymnastics density and all that. So they're like, fuck you. I'm going to go work with this other coach, or I'm going to go follow this program that's giving me that stuff. That person might get really good for those 12 months, but it's like, you get 12 months down the road and you're like, the labrum's gone and, the knee is here and all that stuff. So I'm not saying individual design is the end all be all, but I believe truly that it's the most sustainable fitness program.
This is reminding me of, there have been wildly successful group programs that aren't individualized, or maybe they are a little bit, but generally no. Like, like one of the, I guess, stereotypical examples of like, oh, this is a system and it worked great. And so people try to try it outside of that system and it doesn't work at all. It's like the Bulgarian weightlifting. Like it was, you put all of these people in the top of the funnel and just kind of see who comes out the other side. And for the people who do come out the other side, they end up doing really well. I feel like something like West Side might be another good example where it's like there's a atmosphere. Everybody might be coming in and doing like the same strength movement on that day. And it's, not to say that wouldn't get individualized with like accessory work or something else. But in general, those programs are something that is sort of generalized across the board, and just because of the environment that those people are in, it allows them to get to a pretty high level quickly, but then also a lot of people get broken.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the theory that, you throw work at someone or you throw work at a lot of people, and the ones that are extremely resilient will adapt to that work and they'll get really good.
Yeah.
The people that are not resilient and you say, okay, we're going to do, double 6 times a week, they may last 3 or 4 weeks and they're out, man. But the people that are extremely resilient, those people might last a year or two and like still, see those quote unquote beginner gains for that 1 or 2 years. And even coaches, and I assume there's probably some coaches that are listening that work with individuals. If you're working with an individual that's coming out of that like ass kicking model, you have to think about how you transition them out of that. Because the last thing you want to do with any individual is make them worse, right? So let's say that you're working with that individual that's doing doubles 6 times a week. And let's say they're a CrossFitter, right? And it's September and you're like, hey man, like you're doing like lactic endurance sets in September and you're doing doubles. It's like, let's save that till we get a little bit closer to the season. But they're like, I've been doing this for 2 years, right? And they're like a pretty good athlete. If you as a coach take that away from them and you're like, oh yeah, we just got to do some easy aerobic work and some resistance training, and you like test them in something 6 weeks down the road, they're going to get worse, right? So, it's always that, meeting every individual exactly where they are. So meeting that person where they are, it's like, what's that transition out of doing ass kicking work to like, okay, let's sustain this, hold on to what you've acquired over the last 2 years and peak at a higher level than we were at last year when we get to in season. Right. So I think it's really important to understand where people are and how different individuals adapt. Because that's the crazy thing, man, is every single person adapts differently. So what works for you is most likely not going to work for me. And if it does, it's going to stop working for me at some point. So it's like, right. How do we adapt to that?
Yeah, it's really interesting how like some people, they get addicted to like, the ass kicking. And, if that's something that you don't give them as their coach, it's like that trainer who's screaming at the person to like do more work or to, get a couple extra reps in or something. And they are, right there. And the person's like, well, if you aren't doing that to me, then that's what I need. Mm-hmm. The translation to maybe functional fitness today is like, I need a Metcon every day. Like, otherwise, like, I don't feel like I'm getting good work in. It's like, why are you addicted to that feeling? And first of all, I feel like the coach athlete relationship is like talking about that. But then secondly, it's like, as a coach, for me, often when I have those types of athletes, I'm like, well, I'm not going to give you exactly what you want, but I'm going to give you a little bit of what you want because I want you coming back to me and trusting me that I'm not just going to like leave you out to dry with like the things that you found valuable, even if I think they're the wrong things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, I like that approach.
Yeah. I mean, I've just found so many people in functional fitness are that way, where they're addicted to anything super hard, super lactic. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the fun thing though is understanding why are they addicted to that, because there might be some good shit in there. Right. I have a little bit of that in me, right? Where it's like, I enjoy moving and doing, quote unquote hard work. I really enjoy that stuff. So even in the way that I exercise, I've found a way of like, how can I do that sustainably? And I look at, what do I put in my own program? What kind of exercises and movement selections do I put in that like hard work? And the beautiful thing about, aerobic work is we can make aerobic work extremely hard and still be very sustainable depending on who the person is and if you progress them appropriately. So if someone comes back and they're like, hey, Ben, man, I just really love breathing. I love that feeling. It's like what I would do is I would lean into that and I would have a really robust conversation on where they're at right now. And if their capabilities are extremely high, it's like, hey, yeah, we can do some varied stuff, right? I just want to make sure that this varied stuff that is making you breathe and making you sweat is inside of what you're capable of doing and what you're capable of recovering from, right? So it's like, we're not going to do that 6 times a week. We might do that every other day, right? So we're going to do that 3 times a week. And the exercise selection that's going to be inside of that is going to be this. Like all of these patterns, you're extremely capable of performing, and you're going to give that person what they want. You're doing resistance training 2 or 3 extra days on top of that, and everyone's happy. Like you're on like this awesome progression with them. They're getting better. They feel really good, but you're meeting them exactly where they are. So I think we have to, I mean, by me saying I believe in individual design over everything else, I understand that there's a level of bias, and there's some dogmatic thinking inside of that. But I think we have to lose the bias and lose the dogmatic thinking wherever possible. Like there's no one right way to do anything. And I think the sooner that we all realize that, the better off we'll be. And, every new client that you coach is another N=1, right? That's another opportunity for a coach to learn something because they've never worked with that individual and how they respond to work. How they adapt, the things that they enjoy, the things that they don't enjoy. So I don't care if you've coached thousands of people, one-to-one, you onboard client 1001, and you're definitely going to learn something new. And if you're not open to learning something new, you're just, you're not understanding the concept of every individual is completely different.
With coaching in this avenue, it just seems like a coach needs to have so many more options available to them and like methods of things that they can use versus if we have a coach and maybe they're like an endurance coach and they're like, I always give these 5 protocols to the people that I coach and they always say success. And it's like, well, like number one, is that being truthful? But number 2, it's like, it might actually be fairly accurate depending on what type of level of athlete they're working with, what that actual protocols look like, etc. But I think when you have goals that are varying, or if someone's like a competitor, like the testing body so varied that it becomes something where a coach has to be super adaptable. And as a result, I think coaches have way more, you can make more of a career out of it because it's something that's ever changing. And because it's ever changing, it's sort of evergreen and you like appreciate it more as a coach in the space. I don't know if you find that to be the case for a lot of people at OPEX, like CCP coaches.
Yeah, I think so, man. I think, I think the sooner that we realize that, like I said, man, that there's just no one right way. And the sooner that we realize that you as a coach can actually hold someone back, the better off we'll be. And what I mean by the latter statement is, gosh, man, I could think of dozens of athletes, whether those are CrossFitters, endurance athletes, field sport athletes, that their strength conditioning coaches were just there to ensure that they were ready for the competitive season. That's it. Mm-hmm. And you want, like, if we walked into the weight room and we're like, okay, that's LeBron James over there. I need to know what he's doing for fitness. I need to understand his program. You look at the A, B's, and C's with LeBron James, and it's like, okay, this guy's doing some single leg jumps with landings just to kind of like prepare for some bilateral squatting. Then he's doing like quarter back squats with 185 pounds times 8 reps. Then he's doing some like crazy like perturbation banded stuff, banded row stuff. And then he's going on the bike for 15 minutes and he's doing that 4 times a week. And that's his program. It's like, is that making LeBron James? It's like, no. It's like, is that a bad program because it looks so elementary and like the guy's doing quarter squats? No, it's like whoever is giving him that work understands like my job is to not make LeBron James worse. That's it. Like I want LeBron to move. I don't want him to get injured. Yeah. And I don't want to make this guy worse. Right. So there's a lot of, I know LeBron James is like polar, like that's polarized, right? Like that's the best basketball player in the world. Or one of the best, depending on who you are and what your opinions are. But that's a polarized example. You take athletes in any discipline, and there's athletes like that, right? Where it's like, you just need to give them stuff to set them up for the greatest amount of success, whether that's mentally, whether that's injury prevention wise, whether that's, you have to build confidence before their season starts. The strength conditioning coach isn't always the person that's going to boast that person to success through exercise. I think the sooner that we realize that, the better off we are as well. And that's where the relationship aspect really comes into play.
Yeah, I think a lot of younger coaches, myself included a couple of years ago, would have balked at the idea of like, that's LeBron James's program. Like, no, he should be doing all these, I have all these ideas of things that he could be doing that would make him greater. And it's like, no, you just need to like get out of the way and let LeBron James be LeBron James. And that's often the case with like better athletes. It's like, just, put the things in front of them that will allow them to express who they are as an athlete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good example. I know that's an example of like, a sport that's not exercise, right? So,
yeah.
Someone might be coaching a CrossFit and they're like, well, that makes no sense. My athlete needs to do that stuff to compete. And I think of a very specific example of a girl that I worked with in 2015 to 2017. And this girl came to me and she's like, I want to make regionals. And, I'm like, okay, cool. We had like this consultation. She's like sitting in front of me. I pulled up like the Southeast leaderboard and she was like 800th or something like that. And I'm like, oh man. So I was like, okay, let's have a conversation about where you're at and blah, blah, blah. Took her through some testing and I'm like, this girl is fucking like, she's strong. She has great capacity. Why isn't she able to perform? And what we did for the next 13, 14 months was just like, I was just like, okay, let me just give her stuff, let her express that. She didn't get that much better. Like her numbers got better because she was more rested. That was it. We get to like February, she's like preparing for the Open and she's like putting up some really good numbers. Like we did some pre-competition stuff where we re-hit some of the previous year's regionals Open tests. And she's like, she would have jumped like 400, 500, 600 spots on the leaderboard with those tests. So she was very confident going into the Open because she thought that she was getting like this secret sauce program and this was going to make her great. We go, she ends up like, top 25, top 20 or top 30 or something like that. She qualifies for regionals. And I look back at her program. I'm like, okay, what did we do? And I didn't give her anything like great. Like I was just like, okay, let me follow some principles and ensure that she's recovered every training session, because I looked at what she was doing before and it was like I'm not going to name the name of the program, but everyone would know who they are. But it's like, she was doing way too much. And the issue is she never had an opportunity to recover. So she was always fatigued. She was always like, grabbing for more liquid carbs when she was feeling down instead of like relaxing, taking some time off. Yeah. And she got a lot better. Right. And that's in CrossFit, right? Where it was like, hey, what we're going to do to get a lot better, because she was so naturally talented. It's like, what we're going to do to get a lot better is we're going to work on, anytime we did strength speed work, it was like, they were all skill sessions, right? It's like holding her back with like muscle snatches, high hang snatches, stuff like that. Cause I'm like, I don't want you pulling heavy from the floor because your technique is actually garbage. Right. But she was just strong enough where this girl had like a 215, 220 pound snatch. And it just looked atrocious. And, over the year, we bumped that up to like 225, but it looked good. And she could do it in like battery settings over and over. And and I remember having that conversation with her after regionals, and she's just like, what was the answer? What did we do? Blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, hey, I just allowed you to recover. That was it. I was like, you're so naturally talented. If you just kind of went about this thing by yourself and like followed some really good principles, you would have ended up in the exact same spot. Right. But the secret sauce wasn't the program. The secret sauce was, building confidence in her, allowing her to recover, and going into that competitive season extremely confident because she thought she was going to win. She thought she was going to win the region. So that's just a story that's CrossFit specific, where it's like, we can still follow that LeBron James example with people that are just naturally talented athletes.
Yeah. Getting out of their way and allowing them to be able to express without being, beaten down and fatigued, and having their fitness be masked by fatigue. Yeah. There's a lot to be said for competing when you're fresh versus competing when you're fit and tired.
Yeah, exactly. And her and I still have a really good relationship. I don't coach her anymore. She's not in competitive fitness anymore, but her and I still have conversations, and some of those learnings from back then. We still have conversations about in life where she's just like, I want to do this, I want to do that. She's like an entrepreneur, extremely successful. And we have that conversation of like, hey, remember what we talked about back in 2015, 2014, whatever year that was. We can only do and exercise what we can recover from. I'm like, hey, we got to follow that same concept for life, right? It's like, what are you doing in life on a day-to-day basis? Are you able to adapt and recover from it and get at the same or a higher level the next day? And there's some good learnings that go from, ideas and ideologies that we, have in fitness and how we can transform those ideologies into real life as well.
Yeah. I think a big theme of what we've talked about so far is listening to the athlete. And like, that's obviously a big part of individual design, but just like coaching in general, that's just good coaching. And I had Kyle Ruth on this season. It was episode 23. And he talked about athlete-centric coaching is what he called it. I've heard you use a term. I think you coined it and they were kind of joking about it. Backroom Talk, check it out. That's his podcast. But you use a term that was called reactive periodization.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you made it up. We're going to say that you coined it. So yeah, I think that's a very similar in concept to athlete-centric coaching and some of the concepts that Kyle talked about there. But can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. So I think I made that up unless it was like, I heard it somewhere and it was just like sitting dormant in my brain for years. But yeah, the idea, I think we were talking about individual design and I think I had just jumped off a CCP call with a bunch of coaches around the world, and we were talking about periodization, and we were talking about different types of periodization and what's the best and all that. And I'm just like, hey guys, you got to realize that you're working with people one-to-one, right? You may have a plan week 1, and by the time you get to week 6, you've noticed that although you're still on the same track-ish, your plan pivoted a little bit, right? It's like when you're working with someone one-to-one, that is reactive periodization because we're looking at what happened last week. How are we going to pivot or stay on track to ensure that the person that we're coaching is continually adapting to the program that we laid out in week 1? So we could have this great plan week 1 of like, linear periodization. And we're like, we're going to go from 10s down to 8s and we're going to increase intensity and decrease volume over the weeks. And then we start to pivot and understand what the athlete or what the client is adapting to. And we're just reacting on a week by week basis. So when we look at, periodization models, I think that's something that I've never heard talked about. It's like, hey, we need to react to what's happening with the person that we're coaching. And we need to periodize based on that. We need to periodize based on what they're adapting to or not.
Yeah. I think the reason why it resonated with me is because that's like, this is what I do. Like you sort of have a plan laid out, like say it's a pretty linear intensity build for back squats. And then each week I look at the feedback from the week before for my athlete and it's like, oh, you're at RPE 6 this week. We're good to go. Like just build on that. And then next week it's 7.5. You're like, all right, fine. And then it's like all of a sudden you're at a 9 and you're like, oh, like I can't just continue to build this progression. So you have to be able to react to, what that athlete's actually giving you. So I think maybe one of the things that's required for something like reactive periodization would be, pretty good athlete feedback. Are there types of things, obviously, like you can have like maybe simple things would be like RPE, weights that they used, reps that they hit on like AMRAPs or something. What other things besides like those score type numbers are you might want in terms of feedback from an athlete?
Yeah, I think we have to look at the different models of coaching and be honest that, if you're coaching digitally or remotely, it's extremely hard to get really good feedback from the people that you're coaching, no matter what parameters you put in place. If you're coaching someone in person and you see that person training on a daily basis, it's very easy as a coach. You understand, what you wrote in terms of what the intention was and the A, B's and C's. You see how they execute the A, B's and C's. You refine some things on the floor with that individual. That's in your brain. And when you go back to design their next week, you're thinking about those things and you're communicating with them inside of the design. So it's like you have, your program design software up and it's like, we're doing a high hang snatch. And it's like you have like a little asterisk below, hey, remember what we talked about with keeping your chest high and, pushing yourself underneath the bar instead of catching at parallel and driving down, right? It's like, it's the things that it's just always connecting to the feedback that you gave your client the week prior, 2 weeks prior, whatever the case is. That's just a lot harder to do if you're in a remote setting. So in a remote setting, it's like, if you really want feedback, you have to see people move, right? I think that's the most important thing, because we can use RPE scales. We can use load prescriptions. We can use load range prescriptions. We can say, I want this at this intensity on the assault bike. We could do anything, but there's nothing like seeing it. So if you truly want feedback, I think the highest level of feedback is actually seeing them perform the work. So to see them perform the work, you need to have them record them doing that work. And I know that's a lot more challenging based on what it is. We don't want people recording like 35-minute AMRAPs and uploading, but seeing movement, seeing breathing, because someone can row 500-meter intervals, and you have a prescription on what the pace per 500 meters is, and they just nail it. You pull up your software and you're like, oh man, they crushed. And what you didn't see is that they were on the floor dying between each interval, and they were just like barely hanging on. And now the recoverability the next day was just trash, and so on and so forth. So I think seeing people do the work and how they respond to the work is the highest order way of understanding how they're adapting or executing the work that you prescribe.
Yeah, very true. I've had a few instances where I've been coaching an athlete remotely, and then I have the opportunity to like meet them in person. I like watch them go through like the program that I've written out for them on that day. And it's like they're executing different warm up pieces and stuff. And just like seeing like even the pace that they go about going from transitioning from A to B to C, like all of these little things. It's like, it's super interesting to sit there and watch, like kind of a fly on the wall. Like if you like kind of remove yourself from that a little bit, like just, it's really easy for an athlete to basically attack a workout, just like a training piece, differently than you have in your mind how they would go about it. Like, oh, I wrote it this way. So it seems like since all of these pieces are here, that they're going to go about it. And this session should take 60 minutes. And you find out that it took them 2.5 hours. And it's like, where did you like lose all that time? Or what was your movement quality like in your warm up? Like, that's not what I expected for this drill at all. Even though I have like a video included, like there's all that stuff. So yeah, it's definitely more challenging and remote, but if you can get videos, that's definitely the way to go.
Yeah. And I think it's always connecting too, right? Like it's one thing as a coach, and we talk about this quite often as well. It's one thing as a coach to ask for a video. If you're not actually engaging and giving really good feedback in that video, don't freaking ask for it, right? There's nothing worse than a coach that's just like overwhelmed and they're coaching too many clients and they're just like going through the motion. And they never communicate with their clients on a week by week basis if they're coaching remotely. So it's like, it's always weird to find that fine line of, scalability and time and price per hour and price per client and all of that. And love, right? And like giving that client love and showing them attention. It's always that weird thing. And it is a very, very fine line. But I think the really good coaches, they find a really good groove by setting up extremely good expectations before starting to work with that client. And they understand how that's going to go on a week by week basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing that Kyle had mentioned in that interview was like, he tends to give less frequent feedback, but the feedback that he does give is more in depth then. Mm-hmm. And just rather than trying to have touches all the time and like it being really surface level, not really useful, to make sure like when you are giving feedback or talking to an athlete that's a little bit more in depth and you can kind of get past the surface level of what's going on with, I mean, that could be movements or just like the person's life as a whole too, which I know you guys do like, I don't know what you call them exactly, but like coaching catch-up calls where it's like maybe a 30-minute sit down once a month or something. And you kind of catch up and you can not only then talk about movements in the exercise prescription, but also some of the other lifestyle pieces that are going on outside of an actual session that you're prescribing. How do you at OPEX or you personally think about coaching lifestyle?
Oh man, That's a big one.
I know this could be a whole nother topic for another day, but
yeah. That we should set up another one and just talk about this. But lifestyle is our bread and butter. I'm a systems guy, right? So when I think about coaching and setting coaches up for success and coaching their clients, I always think about what systems can you put in place to set yourself up for success. And I like what you're saying that Kyle was saying, and like, hey, I don't want to do shit just to do it. Like right. I want it to have reason and impact. I don't want the surface level, like emoji on your back squat, like cool, bro.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think that's what he was referring to. Right. Yeah. So, we created our own program design and lifestyle design software and Coach RX. And right now it's only available to CCP coaches. So what we did inside of this software, it's like, yes, of course we can design exercise and blah, blah, blah. And it has all the bells and whistles there, but our coaches have the ability to press a button at the top right of a calendar for each one of their clients, and it flips into lifestyle coaching. And that's where we coach what we call basic lifestyle guidelines, or BLGs. So we're coaching hydration, we're coaching sleep, we're coaching movement outside of the gym, we're coaching food hygiene, we're coaching rhythm, we're coaching all that stuff through the app. So what I'm pushing on, our coaches inside of our platform is, guys, our competitive advantage is the ability to coach people in the shit that actually matters for their lives. And that's lifestyle and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Anyone could design solid training programs. And a year ago, we were like, oh, guys, one day AI is going to do this thing. And it's like, we're there already. There's some really good AI programs that are designing back squats and push presses and all that stuff. And they're doing a great job doing it. But there's not AI that can have a conversation with someone, look in their eyes, see the emotions when you ask them a question, understand how life is, and what those low-hanging fruit pieces are that they can coach in lifestyle to actually make them a more robust human being in terms of, health and wellness. So I think us as coaches, we have to start putting lifestyle before exercise. Like, lifestyle should be the most important thing. When we jump on a consultation with our clients, we should talk about lifestyle for 20 minutes and then hit on exercise for 10, right? Like, I think those are the things that we need to start doing to ensure that we still have that competitive advantage when, Apple Fitness Plus decides to up level and make that platform something interesting. When, Mirror and Peloton and all that stuff team up and like, hey, let's make this massive thing. So, if someone's going to be doing exercise remotely, they're just doing it through us. So I think coaches need to really start to think about, or I know coaches are thinking about it, but they need to really leverage relationship building and lifestyle coaching. So I think lifestyle coaching is extremely important.
Sort of a prerequisite almost. Like, you need to have this level of sleep hygiene and this number of quality hours of sleep, and you need to be able to identify what real food is before you can go and do intense work. Like, the work is always like the end to like so much of coaching and testing. Like, even your guys' assessment process, like the BMW, the W is the work, that's at the end. Like, you do that after the other stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a smart way for a lot of other coaches and even athletes who are coaching themselves to go about it. Like, analyze the rest of your life and then think about the work that you're putting in outside of that.
Yeah. Intentions matter though, right? Because for someone that it's like that person that I talked about, 45 minutes ago, where it's like, I don't give a shit about what 2 years looks like. I want the next 12 months to be extremely successful. I want to, I'm performance biased. I just want to improve performance over the next 12 months versus an individual that's like, I want to be doing this stuff when I'm 60, right? I want to be able to do a strict muscle up and play with my kids and walk up this mountain when I'm 60. It's like the intentions matter for each one of those people. And when we start to think about health, wellness, longevity, and all of that, it does definitely play into both of those avatars, someone that wants to perform really well and someone that wants to live really long. But the biomarkers that we're looking at and the lifestyle pieces that we're implementing with the person that wants to live really long are completely different than the ones that just want to perform, i.e., we can't tell that person that wants to perform that they need to, add, 120 minutes of walking up the side of a hill every day with their kids, right? They're like, I don't have time. I need to get better at muscle ups and muscle ups under fatigue. So it's like a lot of their time is actually spent in the gym, breathing hard and heavy, which is actually not making them live longer and prosper, right? The person that's health, wellness, and vitality focused, we're like, hey, let's do some patterns and like, let's do some squat stuff, some bend stuff, some push, some pull, blah, blah, blah. Let's do some pacing and some easy aerobic work. And let's only do that like 3 or 4 times a week. And then let's, get outside, ride bikes, hang out with your family, get some sun, all of that. So lifestyle coaching for someone that truly wants to live a really long time and be healthy is a lot easier, I should say, because it connects to their intentions than the person that wants to perform.
Yeah. I think that the average gym goer, regardless of what age they are, anywhere from, teens up until 60s, who goes to a gym, I don't think most of them understand that like, oh, I don't have to like crush myself, or even just like, I need to get a really solid workout in 5 days a week to be healthy. And the intensity is usually pushed way past the level that they would ever need to if they're looking for health and vitality as like the goal.
Yeah.
Which I just say that because I think a lot of people listening might be like kind of taken back by what you just said as like, but I totally agree. It's just like, if that's the paradigm you're working with, it's just a different conversation.
Yeah. Like I'll take one very specific example. Let's look at blood sugar management, right? Someone that is performance focused, they're not really that concerned of long-term effects of taking in 120 grams of liquid carbs between sessions, right? Is that going to likely have an impact on blood sugar management a decade down the road? Absolutely. Right. So it's like, those people might be doing things that are quote unquote healthy in terms of lifestyle, and they get a bunch of sleep and all of that, but the intentions behind why they're doing it aren't for health, they're for performance. So when we look at it through that lens, we have to understand like, yeah, like they may seem like they're living very healthy lifestyles, but that's just a byproduct of them having the understanding that they have to recover to go to war tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
In the gym. So yeah, I think the intentions, going back to that, are really important, and why one person is focused on lifestyle versus another. Because a lot of athletes are focused on lifestyle because they need to improve their performance.
Yeah. And oftentimes people who are not even athletes, they just want to perform in other ways. If you're an entrepreneur and you need to be cognitively alert for, 8+ hours a day, your prescription needs to be, again, having the attention so that you can do that. And it aids you in doing that, versus something else. Yeah. I think that this conversation just is something that for a lot of people, especially in our circles, it needs to develop a long way. Like, I think in sport, people usually understand that. It's like, okay, I was a college athlete. Like, that is not for health. Like, if I was playing football and having to take a bunch of ibuprofen or something, like, because all my joints are hurting and I'm hitting people and all that, like, people are like, of course that's not for health. But when we take it to the sport of fitness, people are like, the circles overlap less than people think they do. At least that's the impression that I get from a lot of people that I talk to.
Yep, absolutely, man.
Cool. Final question for you. Let's pretend you were graduating. Let's say you have an exercise science or exercise phys degree, 2021. Is there any advice that you would have for yourself coming out into the current situation?
Oh man, that's a good question. Yeah, if my goal was to be, successful in this industry, I think that's kind of where you're going with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me take a second, because it's an important question. I'm biased, right? Part of me is like, yeah, go through CCP and the world will be easy, but that's not reality, right? Like, there's a specific coach that CCP is really good for. I would tell that person that's graduating, go out, get a lot of experience and actually working with individuals, and don't get too caught up in, learning everything under the sun. Don't get too caught up in what other people in the industry know and what you're seeing on social media. There's a lot of really good shit that comes from just like building relationships with people and working with them. And, you're coming out of that thing with some sort of knowledge base, right? Like I came out of that thing with not a lot of knowledge base, because I was that person, that I went the kinesiology route and, exercise science and all that stuff. And I came out and I'm like, what now? What I would do if I wanted to go that route was I would just go work for someone and work with a lot of people. And the stuff that's inside of my toolbox in terms of knowledge, I would just put that stuff to play, and I would start to understand that stuff in a more real way, like real world way, and understand what works, what doesn't work, what works for this person, what works for that person. And I would work with individuals to do that. So I would almost like put a pause on education for a little bit. I would be like, okay, I'm going to go 12 months. I'm not going to learn anything new. I'm just going to go implement the stuff that I know right now. And I'm not going to beat myself up about not knowing, higher level shit and like all the stuff I'm seeing here and there. And, I'm not going to compare myself to other coaches and trainers around the world. So that would be my advice. Stop education for a little bit, go work with people, understand, like get a real life understanding of what what you don't know, which I think is as important. And then, look at what your niche is going to be and what direction you really want to go in and dive deep into that niche.
Become a practitioner.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I love it. Hey, Carl, thanks for doing this today, man.
Yeah, buddy. Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's Ben again, and I wanted to take a minute to talk about our online training program, The Protocol. The Protocol is for athletes who want to train for the sport of fitness. It's programmed by me, and it's my best attempt at preparing athletes with varying strengths and weaknesses for the demands of the sport. And I do this through the use of silos, which basically means I segment parts of the program based upon athletes' ability in a particular area. So for example, an element of the program this fall on Tuesdays and Thursdays was gymnastics-focused training. And there are 4 different silos, so athletes could choose to work on chest bars or muscle-ups or handstand push-ups or handstand walks. In other words, we are all doing the same core program, but there are ways to individualize it on a weekly basis. And as part of the program, I also include coaches' notes, technique videos, and educational resources almost daily. My goal is to not just have this feel like you're doing a workout plan, but to feel like I'm actually coaching you through the process of becoming the best athlete you can be. And having access to the protocol is just part of the benefit of being a pro member. You also get instant access to the Vault, which is exactly like it sounds. It means that you unlock the ability to be able to download all the programs that I've ever written. So this includes things like Bulletproof Body, which is the accessory work for functional fitness, gymnastics density for the Big 5, functional thickness, your first muscle up, cyclical supremacy, overhead squat mobility, breathwork for the sport of fitness, and it could go on and on. And lastly, you get instant access to pro articles, which are on topics that I really want to safeguard from the public and keep for my athletes. Stuff like cycle speeds for CrossFit open movements, strength ratio data analysis, so basically determining your relative weaknesses on strength work, breaking down sanctionals programming or games programming, energy systems testing and analysis, and a whole lot more. And if this sounds like stuff that you're into, you can get a 7-day free trial of Pro. Simply head over to zorfitness.com/pro. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay the course.